Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see attendees coming into the virtual room. Thank you so much for joining us today. I see we're filling up fast. We are expecting a pretty full house. This event actually sold out, which was really exciting to see all the interest in talking about this topic. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction as we wait for people to join the room. My name is Kevin Schott. I am the Director of Engagement at the Eidos LGBTQ+ Health Initiative. Today, thank you for joining us for the Connecting Conversations. A big part of these events is trying to connect people from different sectors and get people talking. So as you're filtering in, friends, I'm going to ask you to do little introductions if you feel comfortable, maybe just putting in the chat your name, where you're joining from, and maybe one or two things you're interested in hearing about today. Again, only if you feel comfortable. And while folks are putting that in the chat, I'm going to share my screen and tell you a little bit more about Eidos and this topic that brings us together today. All right. So here are our panelists. You'll hear from them in just a second. Before I give things over to them, let me tell you a little bit more about Eidos. So we are a relatively new organization, just about a year and a half old. We're based at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing, and we're dedicated to the mission of transforming LGBTQ+ health by getting evidence-backed interventions out into the real world as quickly as possible. Our belief is that the LGBTQ+ community has never lacked for creativity, energy, positivity, doing good work to support the community, but that too often this work has been siloed. One of the things we try to do at Eidos to accelerate the pace of change is break down those silos and make sure that we are inspired by the best that healthcare, business, policy, community, government, academia have to offer, and connect these conversations so we can scale our solutions as quickly as possible. Now, this is important because even as social acceptance of LGBTQ+ people increases, health disparities still linger. We still see unequal outcomes in things like cancer, cardiovascular disease, sexual health. All right. In order to address these, we need to get new solutions out because these problems will only grow as every generation who's had the safety and ability to come out, more people come out. If we don't solve these problems now, they're only going to become more public, more apparent. So it's time to address LGBTQ+ health disparities. And that means going wide, all right? At Eidos, we believe that health is more than just a doctor or nurse or prescription pad. A huge network of forces support your health. And one of those things is, in fact, your job. Although we don't always think of your workplace as being part of your health, we know it is. Having a job can determine what kind of benefits you have, what procedures are covered, how much of that procedure is covered. So there's that aspect of your workplace and your health. But there's also the aspect of just social connection while you're there, right? Your coworkers can be the people who can do important things for you, like say, you know, you've had that cough for about a week now. Have you seen someone? That's important for your health. Or someone to say, I met the best podiatrist. They will change your life, make that recommendation. That's something that can happen in the workplace. The average American spends about 90,000 hours at work during the course of their lifetime. So having connections there is a really important thing for our health. And it's not just Eidos that thinks so. The US Surgeon General told us so. Last year, they published this report on the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, pointing out that this problem of social disconnection has been getting worse for generations now. And also pointing out that affects LGBTQ people even more, which is why we have to be more intentional in this work. If we want to build these connections, we have to be thoughtful about the ways of doing that. And so thank you to the Surgeon General for kind of sounding off on the importance of doing some of this work. So today we're talking specifically about connection in the workplace. Our lovely panelists will tell you so much more, but just a quick survey of sort of what do we know about the current state of this experience for LGBTQ+ people? Well, there are some alarming statistics, all right? Almost half of LGBT people report facing some sort of unfair treatment in the workplace. That could be not being hired, that could be not getting promoted, that could be not getting a raise, that could be not having you or your partner invited to a work event, right? You can't feel connected if you're not being treated fairly. And on top of that, it's very common for LGBT people to hear negative comments, slurs, jokes about their identity at work. How are you going to be open and kind of share your inner self if it's not safe to do so? How can you make these connections that are so important to your health? And we also know that this burden happens intersectionally, right? The LGBTQ plus umbrella is a diverse one. So people are going to experience this in different ways. We know that white LGBT employees will experience this, but not as high rates as employees of color and transgender employees. And so we have to be thoughtful about these connections, about these interactions, if we want them to grow, and understanding that not everyone's experience will be the same. So if that's what employees are experiencing, how does it look for employers, right? Because if we're having a bad time, it's also not great for the people who are paying us. Now, some things to note here is almost 30% of LGBT people will leave their job due to unfair treatment. So that is institutional knowledge lost. That is having to have to do with the rehiring process. That is all that lost productivity while they're probably not too happy as they're getting ready to leave. That's a real loss for employers. And friends, I tried really hard to get a number just for LGBTQ plus dissatisfaction and effect on workers. Couldn't find it. Please, someone put it in the chat if you can. But it's a 1.9 trillion problem overall. And if just like 8% of those people are queer, that's a $12 billion problem for employers every year. So something that needs to be addressed for them as well. Now, what might addressing that look like? Well, it could look like lots of different things, friends, and you're going to hear some great suggestions later in our program. But some things to think about are things like an equity audit, having someone look through your HR procedures to make sure that as people join a company, there are systems in place for their care and health. Have you done it in the year? Have you done it in the past 10 years? There are trainings you can do, like inclusive communication, being thoughtful. I mean, words mean things. And so getting better at doing things like when you're greeting a group of people, being like, hello, everyone, instead of hello, ladies and gentlemen, excluding our non-binary friends. All right, little changes like that in how we communicate. And then, of course, employee resource groups are things that are becoming more and more common. Having spaces for people with shared identity to talk and share experience, and sometimes do some programming that would be helpful for them and helpful people around them. All of these things that can improve the workplace for LGBTQ plus people. And of course, I've highlighted a lot of issues here, right? Those are some ways to address it, but we never like to leave you here with a sense that you can't do anything because you can. So I always like to talk about the micro level, things you can do on your own without any support, just on your own if you feel comfortable. One thing you could do after this meeting, check in with HR. Has there ever been an equity audit? Has there been one in the past 2 years, past 6 months? Sometimes just asking the question can catalyze a whole procedure. Another thing, listening and be supportive to your coworkers, right? A lot of people don't feel comfortable sharing their concerns with a stranger in HR or their supervisor. Being an intermediary just to check in and say, you can talk to me, this doesn't go any further, but I'm happy with your sounding board, is a big support you can offer. And then, of course, educating yourself, coming to sessions like these, right? It's not always the job of people to educate us. We can educate ourselves. And so I will do a little bit of a shameless plug here. Eidos recently published a report, kind of as a companion to the Surgeon General, about how does LGBTQ plus isolation appear differently in our community than for other folks. So if you'd like to read that, you can find that on our website. I'm sure our moderator will be kind enough to drop a link in a second. So that is how I just wanted to kind of orient our conversation, get some thoughts in your head, but I am going to pass things off now to our panelists, and I'm only going to introduce one of them, which is really our moderator. So Jessica Hallam is the Senior Director of the Eidos LGBTQ plus Health Initiative. She helped put together this panel. She'll be asking questions from a prepared list, but friends, if you have a burning question on your mind, Jessica does a great job of monitoring the chat, so feel free to drop that in, and she, I'm sure, will try to work that in if she can. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass things off to Jessica to introduce our panelists.
Kevin, I love this panel because I want to say out loud, I wish everyone could have the kind of work life that I get to have with you and all of the Eidos team that are on the chat today. I do this work because I've had the chance to be on teams like this, and I just think every queer and trans person deserves to get to be with colleagues like all of you. So Kevin, thank you for that. And I don't know if I love it, but my camera is only showing yours. Can you make it so that I can see everybody in one fell swoop, or maybe it's my problem? Anyway, I'll just ignore me. Oh yes, wait, I'm fixing my view. Sorry, I'm fixing my view. I did it. I figured it out all by myself, everyone. Okay. It's a win. So my name is Jessica Hallam. I am the senior director. Thank you. Uh, I am the senior director here at Eidos. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. Like I said, I have the great pleasure to get to work with wonderful people. I wish that for all of my community. I believe that great jobs are an economic justice issue for queer and trans people. Making a good salary with good benefits, feeling safe, helps us be able to perhaps leave a family that isn't good for us, leave a town that isn't good for us, be in a place that is good for us. So I feel so passionately about wonderful workplaces and good jobs for our community. And I'm thrilled to have three people who have such an interesting, bring lots of different experiences to this. And I want to urge everyone listening to take a little bit of a risk. The chat works well for introverts or extroverts. If you are looking for a job, if you're having workplace concerns, if you've got a question, if you're a boss or if you're not a boss, put it in the chat, and we'd love to really be able to be there for you and build a little bit of community over this next hour. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Kevin and the moderators are going to do with us. We're going to have this conversation for about the next 30, 40 minutes. And then we are going to do breakout rooms where each of our panelists will have their own room so folks can have some more one-on-one time, or you can peel off and get back to work if you need to. So let me start by asking my panelists to go one at a time. I would love for you to introduce yourselves. And on this panel, I'd love for you to share a little bit, not only about the work you're doing today, if you feel comfortable talking about your current job, terrific, but really share with us a little bit about your professional and personal trajectory and how they really intersected, right? So for me, I've had jobs where it was wonderful and a part of my job to be a leader in the LGBTQ community, and sometimes it wasn't. So please share with us what you can so our team, everyone here, can get to know you better. Beck, I'll ask you to go first.
Wow, amazing. Thanks, Jessica, and thanks to Kevin for the great kickoff. So my name is Beck Bailey. My pronouns are he and him. I am the Global Chief Diversity Officer for Accenture. If you're not familiar with Accenture, it's a global professional services, consulting, and technology company. We have over 740,000 employees. So we're one of the largest private employers in the world. And we operate, we have people in 49 countries, and we serve clients in 120 countries. I've been in this role about a year and a half. I've been at Accenture for 3 years. And a little bit about my personal professional trajectory. I came out at 18 as a lesbian. I joined corporate America at 22 as a very kind of mask-looking lesbian in a Fortune Global 500 firm, and was deeply in the closet at that time, as most of us probably were 40 years ago, and at work. And essentially the rest of my career was often a journey towards being with an employer where I really could be exactly who I was in terms of my identity. And actually that my identity was not only permissible or acceptable, but actually celebrated and welcomed, and that the way that my identity informs my experience, my point of view, my strategy is a welcomed piece. And so I worked for, I left that company. I went to work for another company that was more like in the sporting brands, and so was a little bit more lesbian friendly. And then I ended up leaving that to start a company with other queer people that served queer people. I left that to work in a more, mid-sized company where I had different responsibilities, but could be openly myself. And then at some point, I ended up also working at the Human Rights Campaign as an advocate. So I've done a lot of things. And today I run inclusion and diversity for this global firm. And it is back to what you said at the kickoff, Jessica, that I believe, if I had kind of a mission statement or a purpose statement, I would say that I believe in the transformative power of a good job. And I mean, I believe in that transformative power for our community, for the LGBTQ plus community, but I actually mean for a lot of people. And so the more that we can create those spaces, the more equity and justice we can start to affect in the world, because people got to work, the way we're wired in capitalism. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jessica, to pick
Yeah,
the
who
next.
would, that was wonderful, Beck. I really appreciate that. Who would like to go next?
I can go. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning now, actually, still. My name is Daquise Montgomery. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Total Rewards at M&T Bank. So I work in our HR segment specifically with compensation. I've been in the banking industry for, I think about 13 years now. Started in 2011 as a part-time teller at Wells Fargo Bank and have just worked my way up through the ranks. I did pretty much every role you can think of in the retail banking segment, and most recently transitioned over to our HR department. At M&T, one of the things that I'm extremely passionate about and that our organization is very passionate about is our DEI initiatives. So I do head up as president for the Greater Washington chapter of our Pride Resource Group, and also the national co-chair for Pride, which manages all of the Pride chapters across our enterprise, which is really amazing. I get to touch different spaces within the markets. So that's really amazing to have that opportunity. In addition to, some of the things I do internally with our organization, externally, I have the opportunity to be the vice chair for our LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce here in the DC area. It's the Equality Chamber Foundation. So I take a lot of great opportunities to really push the initiatives in different aspects of creating a safe and accepting space for queer and LGBTQ plus members of the community, whether that's in a professional environment or personal. So that's one of the things that I like to make sure that I'm able to push forward at all times, is creating those safe spaces for anyone, but specifically the communities that I'm a part of. So thank you.
I love it already. We've got two folks in firms that I think a lot of us might not think of as LGBTQ inclusive. So I really am just so proud to have you both here. Zach, you also have such a big picture. I can't wait to hear your story.
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. My name is Zach Wilcha. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm the CEO of the Independence Business Alliance, and we are the LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce for the greater Philadelphia area. Cover 11 counties right around Philadelphia. We provide opportunities, access, and resources for our LGBTQ plus owned businesses, our LGBTQ plus employees in any workspace, and our visible allies as well. We try to make allies better. We try to make more of them. And we do that by educating, advocating for, and connecting all the people in our community. We do that through several different ways. We talk about supplier diversity. We talk about networking as a vital skill for folks in our community to help each other up the ladder. We talk about the different kinds of educational programs that we're doing for folks, whether it is technical assistance for businesses or helping people be better allies in the workplace. We're the first Chamber of Commerce in the country, and we believe the world, to start an economic uplift program for trans and gender nonconforming folks. It's called TransWork. I'll link to it in just a little bit. You can find it at transwork.org, but it specifically helps folks in our area either find ways to be entrepreneurs or find a job in spaces that are trans affirming. And we do that by training folks to be trans affirming workspaces in our region, as well as holding job fairs specifically for trans and gender nonconforming folks, because there are such under and unemployment crises in these communities. I think just like the other folks in the column, like you, Jessica, we believe that access to entrepreneurship and jobs does equal economic justice. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're not exactly celebrating capitalism, but we need to navigate queer folks through it. The queer folks are marginalized out of workplaces at a higher rate than any other group. And if there's not resources there to help them become entrepreneurs and be captains of their own ships, then many people fall through the cracks. And we certainly do not want that to happen. As far as my own journey, I'm an attorney by trade. So please do not hold that against me. But I worked in several large law firms in Philadelphia before transitioning to the nonprofit sector, which my parents were absolutely thrilled about. After some work in development from different nonprofits, I was recruited for this job where I became the first executive. LGBTQ plus chambers, just like Daquise said, are all over the country. I think there's 62 different affiliates for the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce throughout the country and 10 or 15 more around the world. And so if you're in a major metropolitan area, you probably have a chamber of your own that you can be a part of. And we'd highly recommend that you become a part of it.
I thank you so much, Zach. And I love having these chambers represented here. That's how I got to meet Daquise. Let's start off a little bit. It came up in the Q&A. So let's dive in a little bit about, we talked a little bit about equity audits. People might call them different things about what are we looking for? We've got lots of folks listening in who are looking for some maybe checklists or guidance. Let's think about what's obvious. And then I'd love to push you all to tell me what's coming down the pike, right? You know, what sort of I like to think about these in stages. What are some of the core, most important offerings we're looking for from employers and in benefits or in workplace safety issues? And then what's really, how can we start raising the bar? So Beck, I'll put you on the spot again first. Start off with what we really want to look for, maybe how we want to raise the bar, wherever you'd like.
Okay.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Zach, not Beck. Beck, you're going to be better suited for this anyway, so please go.
Okay. Well, I'll jump in and then we'll go from there. I think in terms of, there's a question about equity audits, right? Equity audits can be as, I want to say simple or, start somewhere to really comprehensive and really complex. And so, one way to think about getting started is looking at all of the sources and places where you have data to see, from a data lens, is there equity in your practice? So that's things like pay equity, promotion equity, representation data, and so forth. Now, the challenge around our community is around self-identification and whether or not your organization has self-identification, but also the level at which people are participating. If you don't have very strong participation in your self-identification, you don't have enough data to do a meaningful analysis. And there's a chicken egg problem, as they say, with the culture that you create, the trust, the safety, and the level of self-identification people are giving you, especially as you go more and more sensitive into data. So perhaps my race and ethnicity data I give you because I know you're visually kind of assessing it anyway, maybe not. But am I telling you my sexual orientation status, or am I telling you my disability status, which may or may not be visually apparent? And so there's thinking about it from what data do you have, what can you use? If you don't have enough data, then you have to think, let's start by policy and practice. Let's audit policy, practice, benefits. Are they inclusive? Does my parental leave really serve the needs of all kinds of families and parents? Does my healthcare, serve trans and non-binary folks? So, if you do not have kind of the big, robust, data-driven piece because you don't have that data, that's okay. Start to think about data collection and a strategy, but then start somewhere. And we regularly at Accenture move through kind of, there's like a starting basis of an equity audit, and then there's kind of the recurrent coming back to our policies, coming back to our practices and saying, okay, does this still, we looked at this 2 years ago, does it still serve the needs of all of our people? How might we improve the analysis there. And then you will see companies do, I like to think of experience audits. And when we say equity audits, we get into the policies and practices, we look at the data, but how does it really feel when I, Beck Bailey, as a trans man, put my hand up for this experience? Like, let's say we're trying to move people from the United States to, Malaysia because we're growing there. And I, as a trans man or a queer person, am like, is that really for me? What if I put my hand up and said I wanted to go? What is that whole experience going to feel like? How are our teams going to take care of me? And I think about those experience audits through everything, through accessing the benefits, through what if I report a violation, like I'm being discriminated against? What's my experience in that? Through the lens of marginalized identity, and how might we make those experiences more human and inclusive so that they build trust and safety within the organization.
I just have to pick up, and then Zach and Daquise, please chime in and think about things maybe where we want to raise the bar on this. But I want to highlight, Beck, a nuance of what I feel like I heard you say, which is you all doing that work yourself, sort of a check-in before you're sort of waiting for employees to raise the issue. I love the idea of, again, how can we get to a place? I know we all get busy in our HR worlds, but how can we get to a place where we're sort of proactively assessing the environment instead of waiting for a canary in the coal mine moment to say, oh, that experience isn't going well, and someone suffered through sort of showing that up for us. Zach and Daquise?
Okay, I can chime in a little bit. I mean, I think Beck and Daquise will probably be able to explain how large corporations are doing this kind of work. Where we're a little bit more curious as a chamber is how are our smaller companies of 10 to 20 folks or nonprofits handling things like equity audits? They might even not even be calling them equity audits because it's corporate speak that just hasn't trickled down to them yet. So I think that there's a number of different ways to do it. If you have a small and intimate staff, I think that you can map what Beck was saying about the experience audits onto your staff as well. You can have these really intimate conversations with folks about what their experience is in the company based on their own different kinds of identities. There's a lot of, with the LGBTQ plus community, one thing that we recommend that is helpful, but not exactly the end all be all, is the HRC Corporate Equality Index. Some of those questions are really helpful in identifying gaps that you may have in terms of LGBTQ plus competency, whether it's benefits, whether it's leave, whether it is the kind of trainings that are happening in your workplace, for example. So there's those kind of things. If we're talking about where folks can raise the bar, I can give you some anecdotal experience about when we first started our trans work program. We were engaged, we launched it, and all these corporations in Philadelphia were so excited to participate in it. Everybody wants employees that are trans, and they want to learn how to maintain a trans workforce. So we asked them to fill out a quick survey about where they were in trans competency, and we didn't get it back from most of the corporations because all of a sudden where they were able to go to Pride and brag about how LGBTQ plus friendly they were, when it came to giving us their actual policies, folks all of a sudden became very proprietary over what was happening within their companies. And we understand the reasons why that was, but there was a real gap in between what people were saying they were doing for trans communities and what they were willing to reveal to us what the policies actually were. So I think one way that we can, raise the bar when it comes to these kind of things is transparency.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Beck and Zach have hit it all on the nail, hit the head on the nail. But I would also say, I shared this in my introduction. I'm very lucky to work for an organization who I feel has it right. Of course, no organization is perfect, but I think the impact that M&T has provided not only for our internal employees, but externally for our clients as well, is something to really celebrate. I think one of the biggest things is surveying and really understanding the employee base from all levels. We're lucky to have one of the top executives in the banking industry who's an openly gay male, Kevin Pearson, who's an amazing individual, amazing leader, and so forth and so on. So having that experience from him, all the way down to someone who may be in a teller role, gaining that knowledge and their experience of being a part of an organization that does celebrate DEI, but also makes sure that we're understanding through these audits what's really happening in the weeds of things. I think that's number one, what's important. I think training is another huge piece. One of the great initiatives that we've started at M&T Bank is our DEI badging. And it is inclusive of all different types of diverse backgrounds, from people with disabilities, women in the business, LGBTQ plus, people of color, and so forth and so on. So understanding how to interact with different organizations, or not organizations, communities, but also being able to become an ally within those communities. So one of the things that we really encourage within our organization, especially our employee resource groups, is being able to have people who aren't a part of that specific community, whether they're not LGBTQ plus or not a woman or not Asian Pacific, being able to have people be a part of those organizations to understand those cultures and be able to take that back to their teams. So another great initiative that we have at M&T Bank is what we call our DEI Connect. And it's a group where we meet on a monthly basis. And we have different people who are leaders in certain segments of the bank. You don't necessarily have to be a leader or a manager, but people who are really pushing the DEI initiatives, coming to these meetings, discussing different tactics and things or strategies that we've been able to cultivate to create more success from a DEI standpoint, and taking that back to their different segments, which I think is an amazing group. And I think one of our leaders is actually on from M&T for DEI Connect. So there's so many great initiatives that we're doing. I think it starts there, then surveying and really understanding how impactful these different initiatives are, and then taking that feedback from your teams and really implementing those changes that create success.
I have to jump in. I absolutely love that. I'm ready to join M&T. I wish I lived in your town. It sounds like, or sort of, the surveys are helping replace maybe some of that data issue that Beck brought up. We love to talk about data here at Eidos. So it sounds like using surveys has been a great tool for you to create a data set that you can start to compare. I've worked in places where they do a pulse survey. I've actually always loved those. So we love the idea. All of us, I'll speak for all of us, that we love the survey idea. Daquise, tell me, because I know there's people who are probably really excited about the badging and the connect that you talked about. So it's official, like you get that time off. It's sort of considered a part of your job to go to those meetings. Because I know I've worked in places where we have tried to start ERGs, and it becomes a bit of a concern, especially I've worked in places where we've got union and non-union, hourly and not hourly. I'm sorry if I just jumped into the weeds here, but I know there's probably other people thinking it. How does it work, getting to go to these meetings, getting to go to this great learning? I love it. Anything to share?
Yeah, I think one of the things that M&T does very well is offering 40 hours of volunteer time to all employees. And if you're a leader within the resource groups, you get a total of 120 hours, because we understand that you're doing meetings, you're having to get involved in the community, leading initiatives and things of that nature. So I think that's where we initially had the start. That's not to say that we don't have challenges, because of course we are a bank. So we do have storefronts, retail specifically, and sometimes that can be a challenge getting some of our retail employees to come to certain meetings or go to certain volunteer activities in the community. But the best suggestion that I've really been able to suggest to the teams whenever that is the challenge that arises is number one, being proactive with management about the things that you want to sign up for. So if you know that there's a meeting or a volunteer opportunity during the day, just making sure that you communicate that to your manager so that they can make sure staffing is available for the branches. Our clients aren't negatively impacted by wait times or what have you, just because an employee isn't available. But I think the volunteer piece really does help, and the encouragement from upper leadership that rolls down to all of the other employees across the organization, I think is very important as well. And that's something that M&T has done very well at being able to communicate. And I did want to touch back on something that you shared about the data piece, which I think, Beck, you were spot on about making sure you have that data information. We actually have a segment of our DEI office that actually does pull these types of data. But the biggest challenge that we found is what Beck stated earlier, being able to get all of that information from employees. So we really do try to communicate those things through our employee resource groups, through our one-on-one touch points. We do quarterly reviews with management. So in those instances, we're really trying to communicate that information to our employees so that we have a more accurate understanding of the data that we're able to gather.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. There's another question. I'll pivot for a moment here because we don't have tons of time and it's coming up. We've got folks in the chat asking about this age-old question. How do I figure out about this culture as I'm interviewing or looking for work? What are some great strategies you all, this sort of touches on my favorite piece of mentoring advice that we're always sort of talking about. How do you remain somebody who's interested and this is important for them, but we also want to be mindful of boy, I still need a job and I still want to look like a good employee. And, what's the right way, rebel rouser and activist versus, boy, I'd like to still, get a great job. So I'm always trying to find that great advice. The three of you, please share for folks looking for new work. How do we really start to elicit that or look for it in a new job?
Well, I'll kick us off and then maybe we can build. Certainly it's been mentioned before, the HRC Corporate Equality Index as a tool. And I'll just say it's a tool, and what it measures is whether or not a policy or a practice exists. It does not measure how well it is implemented, enforced, communicated, etc. So it's just a way to say, okay, on paper, does this company have a non-discrimination policy? On paper, does this company have an ERG? So there are things like that. That's a place to start. You want to make sure you have some basic infrastructure, if you will, to build a culture on. And then you have to dig a little bit deeper and try to look at the ways that company is showing up in the community. Who do they sponsor and support? If it's a consumer-facing brand, do they bring LGBTQ voices and experiences into their advertising? Do they show up at Pride Month only, or do they show up a little more consistently through the year? I think you want to do a pretty good scan of how they show up in things. And I would also say how they show up in other communities as well, right? Like, are they kind of consistent in a brand position on inclusion? Once you get through those kind of like desktop research, if you will, if you can try to network to people who work there, leverage connections, a LinkedIn and all of that, to try to ask questions of folks like me and Daquise of like our experiences. I think the one thing that I want folks to still understand is, and this maybe goes back to something Zach said about, the survey they sent out about trans policies when they were looking at their thing. As much as we think all of these companies and people really understand LGBTQ lives, trans experience, non-binary identities, that pronouns are important, actually lots of people still really don't understand that. They don't have the information. they maybe know enough to know that they don't know, and they're kind of scared of making mistakes. And so, I also want people to understand expectation management. Like at Accenture, which is, I think a leader in this space, we still have people every day who do not have the best experience. And our commitment is to continue to chase that down and make it better and penetrate the awareness, knowledge, tools that people need to be better managers and leaders. And when I think of the experience of our people, many of our people don't work in our locations, they work at our clients. So it's also the culture and experience of the client. Or if you are a bank teller at M&T, it's the experience of the people coming into the bank and interacting with you, right? So there's only so much, that I think there's also understanding that your mileage may vary depending on who you talk to. And what you're looking for, I think, for me, is a consistent commitment and not not a lack of court cases or whatever. Everybody's going to have court cases. Everybody's going to have, stuff. But what is happening when a problem is raised? And even asking, what happens at this company when someone's not having a great experience? How do you handle that, right? And really try to elicit, do they come from kind of a compliance, like we follow the law and we always do this, and it's like, and everything's, or are they a little more human about it and say, yeah, we know we make mistakes, and we work with our people to make the experience better. And so I think, I don't know, I think it's a lot of, finding out as much as you can. And then also your mileage may vary, because at the end of the day, what your experience is going to look like is largely determined by your team and your boss, and not the whole thing. And that's another thing. You get on a lousy team, a lousy boss, transfer. It doesn't necessarily mean the company's lousy. So, like, raise a concern, address it, try to deal with it, but also move, right? Go somewhere else. So seek out people who are going to value you, see you, recognize your contribution, and respect you in that.
I have to jump in, and then Zach will move to you. This is my advice with mentees all the time, especially in the LGBTQ community, who might not want to come out in a job interview or on the trail. It's a wonderful way to say, hey, tell me about a time that something didn't go as planned, or an issue was raised here at X, Y, and Z place. And I just love to hear about how that went. So it's really honoring that we are all in a growth mindset. Everybody on my team will know I say this every day. We're all in a growth mindset, and so are organizations. And how to talk across to that new supervisor, or listen for an organization that is consistently learning from experiences, so that when things do go wrong, because they will, people will learn new information, or new things will come up that we want to be responsive to, and learning and seeing, how did that experience go? And is that something that you'd be down for? Right. And so anyway, I just love that advice. Zach, please chime in.
Yeah, agree with everything that Beck and Jessica just said. I would add to it, know your legal rights based on where you are when entering a job interview. If you remain in one of the 28 states that does not have a comprehensive protections for employment for LGBTQ plus folks, then you may not be able to ask questions like that in interviews. If you're in one of those states, it may vary from municipality to municipality. Like you're in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, you would be protected by asking the kinds of questions that Jessica was asking. In some of the more rural areas where those protections don't exist, they might sniff you out and not want to hire you for that reason. And everybody needs and deserves a job. So we just want people, and employers should be lucky to hire LGBTQ plus work. But when it comes down to it, know what your rights are before going into interviews. I think when Beck was talking about the many different kinds of desktop investigation that you can do, of course, like employee policies are a great starting point for that. Do they have the kind of health benefits that are going to align with what your specific needs are? Adoption benefits, sort of things like that. Are they using gender inclusive language in their employee policies, which may indicate an overall understanding of gender? look at their marketing, right? If they're not concerned about LGBTQ plus customers, they're certainly not going to be concerned about the well-being of LGBTQ plus employees either. Their website is one place to look, and lots of other external marketing collateral too. Do they have ERGs? And is there an ERG leader that you can do an informational interview with and talk about the willingness to learn that Jessica and Beck were discussing before? Are there ways to help allies be visible at this company? Are there pronouns that are listed? Are there pride flags anywhere on their website? Or if you're going to a bank like M&T Bank, do they have a little pride flag in the window? Something like that may speak volumes. Are there ways that folks have understood promoting the benefits of DEI? And this is one that I'm on my soapbox about this all the time, but really being allies year round and not just during Pride Month or when there are controversies within the community. Are they showing up all year round? I am, just as gay, if not more gay in November and December as I am in June, right? And I think everybody on this call would agree that we sort of feel that way. What are the nonprofits that they are helping? Do they belong to chambers? There's so many different ways that you can do the research beforehand to figure it out. And of course, these are all just tools. They're not going to provide a completely holistic picture, but there are ways, there are little clues that you could see that you're entering a workspace that will at least be affirming for you and that you can build on their progress.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you pointed out some great things. You both did, Beck, Zach, and you as well, Jessica. Something as simple as signatures in an email, seeing if they have pronouns associated. One of the things that I love, and I know I keep bragging about M&T, but one of the things that I love initiatives that we've started is safe and accepting spaces. So if you go into any of our branches, that's a sign that we have in the window. For not only our employees, but for our clients to understand that, hey, you're safe and accepted no matter who you are. As long as you're a professional and respectful person, that's the bottom line that we want to encounter with any client or employee. So that's one of the ways that we're sharing with potential candidates or potential employees that we are a safe and accepting space. And we do heavily have a push for DEI within our organization. Even like I was stating in the chat, looking at websites, a lot of times, I'm currently working on my master's in human resource management. And one of the projects that I had to work on, thank you, was researching different organizations. And I came across the top 100 companies to work for. That's something, I forget the vendor that provides that, but they showcase different data points about the LGBTQ plus initiatives, community involvement, things of that nature. So Google has become one of my closest friends. I use it a lot to research anything. Glassdoor and different other vendors like that are great resources too. However, you have to understand that sometimes some of those comments can be biased based on someone's personal experience and things of that nature. But I think another great way to really understand organizations, and I am a huge advocate for joining Chamber of Commerce's, is getting immersed in your community. Joining these chambers, you're able to network with so many different individuals, different organizations, and firsthand really understand what those organizations are about. And if their organizations are part of chambers, typically they really do have a care for making sure that people feel safe and accepted, inclusive, and really care about the communities that they serve.
I'm going to make you all now talk about, I feel like we're sort of working backwards. I'm going to make you all talk about networking sort of on this individual level. We never stop, even when you've got the best job in the world, we're never stop networking. It is a part of not just getting the next job, but building our profile or building our engagement with the world. I know there's probably people in the chat are getting sweaty just hearing that word a couple times. Daquise, let's start with you. Let's talk about, tell us on a personal and professional level, some networking, how do you do it? What are some great examples? What's something that we haven't thought of? I really want to just make this okay and exciting. Lots of all ideas welcome here. Daquise, please.
Yeah. Well, I think naturally I'm an introvert extrovert. I really like to stay to myself, but I do enjoy networking with others. And so the first thing for me is something as simple as asking someone where they're from. I think that's a great way to open up that conversation and begin to build rapport. I always take it back to being in the branches. How did I build rapport with my clients? And I try to take those same steps when networking outside of the organization or internally within the organization. Just going up to people, getting to know who they are, finding out ways that I can give something that could help benefit them. And then, of course, also something that they can do for me, whether that's connecting me with someone, connecting me with an opportunity, an idea, thinking creative ways of how to overcome challenges that we all experience in our professional and personal lives. So I definitely think that's the best way is to build that rapport with anyone. I also think going to different types of events is going to be a great way. Chambers are a great way to get to different types of events. That's one of the biggest ways that I've been able to network. Anytime I'm out, whether it's at a restaurant or, at a lounge or wherever I may be, I always like connecting with people and understanding their story. So I think, again, it just really goes back to that rapport building piece and really trying to genuinely understand someone and where they're from and being able to be vulnerable enough to share who you are as well. I think it starts there.
I love that because, right, you never know, even if you're at a bar meeting somebody, you never know, sort of where that connection could go and who they might know. And also just helps you sort of practice, right? Being more comfortable and having some good stories to tell. And I love that because I love talking about the, like, where do you live? Where you been? Because I've lived so many different places and I can always find a way to connect with people that way. So I love that. Zach, talk to us about networking. You run tons of events for this.
Right.
And I especially love the reminder from both of you that regular people, just individuals, can come to these events as well.
Yeah, we love regular people. When it comes to networking, we love irregular people as well. Everybody's welcome. I feel like we need a different word for networking because as soon as you say it, you just see people's souls leaving their body. Like if everybody were on Zoom right now, you would just sort of like see the souls like lifting up. But it is vitally important. And I think that, in our community, it's actually, like some of the work is already done because we have some common experience together, right? We all have a little bit of a similar background being part of the LGBTQ plus community. Of course, we're not a monolith, but we've gone through some things that are aligned with one another. So it should be a natural extension of what we do to help one another. And I'm, unfortunately for many around me, a real extrovert. I'm a Sagittarius oldest child who's been told to be quiet his entire life. So I love going out and being able to do that. But I think post-pandemic, everybody has sort of needed a pause and try to figure out how to effectively manage their bandwidth and communication. I think there are a couple ways to do that. One that I really like is, instead of asking somebody what they do, ask them what they like. I think it's a more interesting way to start a conversation, and that may, make its way into what they do. At chamber events, of course, everybody is focused on, what everybody is doing professionally, but it's also a really good way to get to know people on a little bit deeper of a level. And then I think a lot of people go into networking and feel like it might be very selfish or not something that they want to do for themselves. So I like to think of it as a way we're connecting community all over the place. If I met Daquise somewhere or if I met Beck somewhere, it might not be the right alignment for me if I'm looking for a job or if I'm looking for some sort of opportunity, but I certainly know a lot of people who are looking for those kind of things. So maybe instead of just doing this for me, I'm a bridge to another member of our community. And that makes me feel more motivated to get to know people so that I can do a little bit of matchmaking all over the place when it's necessary.
I love that. Beck, what's your favorite networking leveling up moment? I hear we're going to call it leveling up. I love that.
Yeah, I think so many great points have been made. I think what people sometimes also get tripped up over is the transactional nature of networking, and like we so don't want to feel transactional that we don't maybe get to the ask. And I also encourage people, like, we all know what's up, right? Asking for an introduction, asking for someone to review your resume, you know, and being, being really gracious with, if you have time, if this is something you manage, or can you introduce me to this person? I mean, it's okay to ask. So I think we've been so conditioned, like, we have to build this whole relationship, and then we need to, like, every once in a while send them an article, like, I thought you'd be interested in this. And you know we also don't need to be like fake about it. Like, we can also kind of lean into it and say, I think you're a person who might have a connection that could help me. Would you be willing to make an introduction? And totally okay if not, right? And just, not be afraid of, yes, it's a little transactional, but that's actually okay. And just be willing to pay that back to other people, right? Like, that's how it works. And that's, I see Jessica dropping the LinkedIn. Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I mean it. Go ahead and make the ask. It's okay. It's really okay. And I will always do my best to accommodate, and so will most other people, actually.
Beck, I feel like you dated yourself by referencing the send an article. I thought you might be interested. That was like the advice we all got. Everyone's probably old enough to remember, if you're old enough to remember, you want to keep a little thing going before you make the ask. But I agree with you all, and I think we're all hearing it. I want to sort of end on that before I turn it back over to Kevin, which is to say, let's all either find the way to be more bold, get to the point, be sensitive of time and what you're interested in, or for somebody else. And Jane, I love you in the chat talking about neurospicy tips. I love that. Which is, I've had people just tell me how it is that you want me to communicate. Tell me up front, or hang back and write me an email after, you've seen me work a room, right? So I love all of this. I love the diversity of how we engage in this, because we all want each other to be successful. That's what I really hear in all of this. We really want everyone to be successful. Kevin, do you want to chime in and tell everybody what's next?
Yes. So I will start by saying thank you so much, all the panelists, not just for being active in this conversation, but in the chat as well. It's been really great to see you leaving information there for people to follow. For those of us who are coming to the hour now, if you have to leave, we totally understand. Thank you so much for joining us.